1981, nestled deep within the idyllic yet secluded Sierra Nevada mountains of Plumas County, California, a horrifying and unsolved crime unfolded. In the small, unassuming community of Keddie, a single cabin became the scene of a brutal quadruple homicide that left 4 people dead and a haunting silence that has echoed for over 4 decades. This wasn't just a murder. It was an act of extreme violence that shattered a sense of security and left a community desperately searching for answers. This is the story of the Keddie Resort murders. Hello friends, my name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders, where we explore the unsolved cases that still haunt America. In 1981, Keddie was a quiet, rural community, far removed from the hustle of urban life. It was a place where dense forests met serene landscapes, offering a retreat from the world. The Keddie Resort itself, once a charming vacation spot complete with rustic cabins, a general store, a post office, and a hotel with a bar and restaurant, had by this time fallen on hard times. It primarily served as housing for college students, railroad workers, and low-income families, a far cry from its more prosperous past. It was into this setting that Glenna Sue Sharp, a mother of 5, had moved her family only a few months earlier, in the fall of 1980. She had separated from her husband a year prior and was working to build a new life for her children. Living in Cabin 28, Sue received a $250 monthly stipend from the Navy, but still struggled to make ends meet, taking a part-time job at the Quincy Elks Lodge and relying on food stamps. Her 15-year-old son, John, lived in the basement, accessible by steep steps from the back of the house. Her 2 younger sons, Rick and Greg, shared a bedroom, while Sue and her 2 daughters, Sheila and Tina, shared the other. This was a family trying to make a fresh start, unaware of the darkness that would soon engulf their lives. On the night of April 11, 1981, a seemingly ordinary Saturday, Sue's daughter Sheila left home around 8 p.m. to spend the night with the Seabolt family next door in Cabin 27. Sue, her younger sons Rick and Greg, and their friend Justin stayed in Cabin 28. Tina, Sue's 12-year-old daughter, returned home around 9:30 p.m. Earlier that day, Sue's 15-year-old son John and his friend Dana Wingate, 17, had hitchhiked to Quincy, about 6 miles away. Witnesses later confirmed seeing the boys in Quincy trying to flag down a ride home between 9:30 and 10 p.m. This was the last known sighting of them prior to the murders, and it remains unclear exactly when they returned to the cabin. The next morning, Sunday, April 12, 1981, Sheila returned home. What she discovered inside Cabin 28 would forever scar her and the community. Fleeing the grisly sight, she ran back to the Seabolt residence for help. The Seabolts didn't have a telephone, so Zanita Seabolt ran to the resort office asking the owner, Jan Albin, to call the police. Meanwhile, Jamie Seabolt, the oldest Seabolt son, and Sheila returned to the Sharp cabin. In an act of protection, they helped Rick, Greg, and Justin escape through a bedroom window, sparing them from the horrific scene. Initially, all 3 younger boys claimed not to have seen or heard anything unusual that evening. How could such violence erupt in a small, tight-knit community without a single cry for help bringing someone to the door? The crime scene police entered was truly gruesome. John was found lying face up closest to the front door, his hands and feet bound with a tape and electrical cord. He'd been brutally beaten in the head with a hammer and his throat was cut. Next to him, lying face down, was Dana. Although he had tape around one wrist and an electrical cord around one foot, he was not fully bound. He too had been repeatedly struck in the head with a hammer and then strangled. Sue was lying on the floor next to Dana, nude from the waist down and covered by a sheet and blanket. She was bound and she had been gagged with a blue bandana. Sue had the only defensive wounds, indicating she fought desperately with her assailant. She had been stabbed repeatedly in the chest and neck and battered in the head with the butt of a Daisy 880 pellet gun. Tina was missing. Several details immediately stood out. There was no sign of forced entry into the cabin, strongly suggesting the victims knew their attackers or were surprised before they could secure the door. The cabin's telephone was off the hook, the lights were out, and the drapes had been closed. Blood patterns suggested the bodies had been moved and Sue's bare feet were covered in blood, indicating she may have been mobile and stepped in blood at some point during the murders. The overkill nature of the attacks, particularly the repeated blunt force trauma and the extensive stab wounds, strongly pointed towards a personal motive rather than a simple robbery. A steak knife, believed to be one of the murder weapons, was found near the bodies, its blade bent backward approximately 25 degrees due to the savage attacks. A bloodied claw hammer and a butcher knife were also found on a small table. No traces of alcohol or drugs were found in the victims' systems. Burglary and drugs were ruled out early, yet the motive for the killings remained unclear. Police believe the murders occurred between 11 p.m. on Saturday and 2 a.m. on Sunday. Investigators have long speculated that exactly how and when John and Dana returned to the cabin that night might hold the key to breaking the case. If they returned later, perhaps they walked in on a crime in progress, or perhaps they brought the killers with them. Despite the extreme violence that surely must have involved screams and struggle, interviews with neighbors, including the Seabolts, whose home was just 15 feet away, yielded no witnesses to the actual event. Some neighbors later reported muffled sounds during the night, but nothing definitive enough to trigger an alarm. During their initial investigation, the Plumas County Sheriff's Office quickly identified Marty Smart, and his friend John Bobaday as persons of interest. Smart and his family, including his stepson Justin, who was in the murder house the night of the attacks, lived in cabin 26. Bobaday, whom Smart had only met a few weeks earlier, was staying with the Smart family. It would later be learned that Bobaday had a violent past, having served time for armed robbery in Chicago's Statesville prison and in California. There were many discrepancies in the statements Smart and Bobaday gave to investigators. In his police interview, Smart made a comment about Justin that many investigators and researchers have found unsettling. This is just a short portion of that tape.
There's a very high possibility that he could have been awake or alerted to something unusual in that house. He's quiet enough to where he could have noticed something without being detected.
It's an unusual statement. No one had asked whether Justin might have been awake that night, yet Smart volunteered this explanation. For many people studying the case, it raises questions about what Smart believed Justin saw or what he was worried Justin might reveal. This curious remark and other inconsistencies were, unfortunately, never followed up on. Smart's stepson Justin would also prove to be a central yet confusing figure. Initially telling police he was asleep and didn't hear or see anything, his story would later change multiple times. At various points, he claimed to have witnessed the murders and at other times stated he only had a dream about the murders taking place. Police even paired Justin with a police artist to develop a composite sketch of the men he claimed to have seen. Investigators do believe that Justin touched at least one of the bodies after the murder because blood was found on the outside of the bedroom doorknob of the boys' room, and the door was partially open when the police arrived. This suggests a direct physical interaction with the crime scene after the killings. During this critical time, questions and rumors about the quality of the investigation were rampant. Information uncovered in later years indicates that former Plumas County Sheriff Doug Thomas and Marty Smart were great pals, and it was even suggested that Smart lived with Thomas for a time. Former Sheriff Thomas denies this, but these allegations cast a long shadow of doubt on the impartiality and thoroughness of the early investigation. Other critics felt the sheriff's office was simply too inexperienced to handle a case of this magnitude, suggesting a systematic failure rather than a deliberate cover-up. This kind of alleged misconduct or mere incompetence can forever taint an investigation, leading to missed opportunities and a permanent cloud of suspicion over the justice system itself. The immediate mystery was the fate of 12-year-old Tina. Why was she the only one taken that night? Why were her two younger brothers, Rick and Greg, and their friend Justin, left unharmed in a back bedroom, sleeping through such horrific violence just feet away? That detail alone suggests a specific motive or intent that went beyond random violence. Tragically, on April 22, 1984, 3 years after the murders, a man looking for bottles in the woods in Butte County, about 50 miles southwest of Keddie, stumbled upon a human skull. Dental records would identify the remains as 12-year-old Tina Sharp. Pathologists who studied the skull and other bone fragments determined Tina had died sometime close to when she went missing, but her cause of death was never definitively determined. The fact that her body was found 50 miles away suggests the killer had to transport her, highlighting a calculated effort to dispose of evidence far from Cabin 28. Despite the initial controversy and lost time, the search for justice saw significant advancements decades later. In 2016, a claw hammer that matched the one Martin Smart told investigators was missing from his home the night of the murders was discovered. This was a crucial piece of evidence, potentially linking a specific suspect directly to one of the murder weapons. Then, in 2018, DNA from the crime scene was matched to a living suspect. Despite these developments, no arrests have been made, leaving the case still tragically unsolved. Since that April night in 1981, the Keddie Resort community was all but abandoned. At least one family did live in Cabin 28 after the murders, but it sat abandoned for years and was eventually bulldozed to the ground in 2004, erasing a physical reminder of the horror. Today, only a handful of residents still call the Keddie Resort home. A once thriving vacation spot was permanently scarred and largely deserted by the chilling events within Cabin 28. There are questions about this case that bother me. The lack of forced entry is a critical detail. It strongly suggests the victims knew their attackers, pointing away from a random intruder. This, along with the overkill nature of the attacks, the repeated hammer blows, stabbings, and strangulation, indicates an extreme level of personal rage, or a desperate attempt to ensure death, rather than a dispassionate, professional hit. The presence of Martin Smart and John Bobadej with their criminal backgrounds and the discrepancies in their statements immediately draws suspicion. Smart's strange comment about Justin noticing something is particularly unsettling. Combined with Justin's constantly shifting narrative, it feels as though a crucial piece of the puzzle was either being deliberately obscured or poorly recalled due to trauma. And then there's Tina. Why was she the only one taken that night? Was she the target for a different reason? Her separation from the others and the effort required to transport her 50 miles away to Butte County deepens the mystery of her fate. The Keddie murders remain one of California's most haunting unsolved crimes. 3 individuals brutally murdered, a young girl abducted and later found, and 3 young boys left miraculously unharmed amidst unimaginable horror. We have a gruesome crime scene, compelling persons of interest, crucial physical evidence that emerged decades later, and yet no justice. The lingering questions persist. Why did no one hear the struggle or screams that surely must have come from Cabin 28? How could the children sleep soundly while 3 individuals were brutally murdered in the next room? And did allegations of misconduct or inexperience prevent justice from being served? Despite the passage of time and the death of some key figures, the search for justice and closure in the Keddie murders continues. The unanswered question remains: what truly happened in Cabin 28 on that April night in 1981? If you have any thoughts or theories about this case, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.